Hi, everybody. This is Jonathan Becher. I'm president of Shark Sports and Entertainment, and I'd like to give you a warm welcome to our first ever Teal Talk on voter engagement, presented by our good friends at SAP. We are extraordinarily excited today to have the California Secretary of State, Alex Padilla, with us. This is really going to be a treat for all of us. And I'd like to extend my thanks to all the members of Team Teal, to the employees of SAP, to our other partners, and to our suite holders for joining us today to what is a truly important conversation. Before we get going, just a couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, we are recording this webinar. Second of all, you're encouraged to ask questions. To ask questions, please do so through the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll get to those at about the 30-minute mark, and we'll try to answer as many of the questions that come in. And finally, I'd like to sincerely thank and provide appreciation to everyone in the Secretary of State's office, to the Santa Clara County Register of Voters, and to SAP for their extended partnership with us on voter engagement efforts. With that, I'd like to introduce the Secretary of State, Alex Padilla. And Alex's background is phenomenal, but I thought the best way to introduce him would actually be talked about a couple of his amazing accomplishments since the time he took office. And I'm going to read just a few of those to you. In 2018, he launched the California Motor Program, which automatically registers eligible Californians to vote when they obtain or renew their state ID or driver's license. So this program has been phenomenally successful with more than 1 million new voters in its very first year. In fact, in November of 2019, California reached a record high 20.3 million registered voters. Alex also oversaw the 2018 election, where nearly 65% of registered voters cast a ballot, which I believe is the highest turnout since 1982 for a gubernatorial election. We know in presidential years, which are normally the highest, it's more like mid-50s. It's phenomenal that we were 10 points above that as well. And finally, in 2015, he established the vote centers, expanded early voting, and implemented the same-day conditional voter registration through the Voter Choice Act. So that's a reminder to all of you, if you didn't register before the official, you can still go down, register same day on November 3rd, and vote. Because this year, we'd love to get 65% to, I don't know, maybe Secretary Padilla will tell us, maybe he's got an informal goal of even a 70%. Alex, welcome to our show today.
Thank you, Jonathan, and the entire Sharks family for convening around this topic. Obviously, I live it and breathe it every day, but I think it's critically important and obviously timely given the November 3rd general election, just 13 days away. Even that's misleading because folks are voting already. Millions of Californians have already cast their ballot. So thanks for having me. Looking forward to the discussion and hearing from everybody here, see if there's any questions that I can answer.
So I'm going to start with maybe a personal one, if you don't mind, which is I was reading your bio and then I looked you up on LinkedIn. That's what we do, right? We cyberstalk each other before we meet them virtually. And I saw that you studied mechanical engineering at MIT. Fantastic school, tough technical degree. When did you decide to go to public service instead of engineering? And maybe even more importantly, why? That's an unusual background for someone who's dedicated his life to public service.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I do think it's been valuable to bring a unique perspective to policymaking and to governance. I'll give you the very short answer and then the fuller, truer answer. The short answer is, it makes perfect sense to me. Aren't engineers trained to solve problems? And isn't that what politicians are supposed to be doing, right? But the more complete answer is this. Like I had worked off and on in aerospace as a mechanical engineer while I was getting through MIT. When I got home back to Los Angeles after graduating from MIT, not only was it a tough economic time in California in the early 90s, and tough for engineers even, right? Post-Cold War, Defense Department cutbacks, the aerospace sector was shrinking drastically. But it was also a very challenging time politically in California. And I think it's embodied by this example. In November of 1994, there was a proposition on the ballot in California that we refer to as Proposition 187. And it posed a question to the voters of California that said this: should we make children of immigrants no longer eligible for public services? Right? What does that mean? Things like if children whose parents didn't have health insurance through work, and their only option of seeing a doctor if they were sick is to go to county clinic, that was no longer an option, because public health is a public service. There was a debate about public education, but there was a specific element of that proposition that would have required all school personnel to report to the authorities anybody they suspected of being undocumented. I share that because at the time, very painful, right? I had just graduated from college. My parents are immigrants from Mexico, and I was living not just my American dream, but theirs as well, after years of sacrifice and struggle to let my brother and my sister and I get a good education. And now I'm being told that because it's a tough economy, it's the fault of people like my parents in our family, in our community. So I realized then and there that I had no choice but to engage. I didn't realize I'd run for office one day, but I knew that I needed to engage in electoral politics through registration, through voting, not just individually, but trying to organize those around me to have their political voice heard. And so I never looked back. From voter registration drives to volunteering on campaigns, managing a couple of legislative races, and then eventually running for office myself. That I think 1994 experience is what had me make that pivot. And I share that because that was an issue that resonated with me. I think at any given time there's an issue that resonates with anybody once we stop to think about it, and how civic engagement is part of working towards a better future for our families, for our communities, and obviously for our nation.
So fantastic story. I want to come back to the concept of civic engagement in a minute, but maybe before then, I'm going to guess that a large majority of people on this Zoom call probably don't know exactly what a Secretary of State does. Please don't be offended, but could you just give us the general outline of what's your scope, what are you trying to accomplish? How do we think about Secretary of State?
So not offended in the least bit. Even some of my closest friends and family still wonder, despite my storytelling. Look, anybody who knows what a state Secretary of State does, if you know one thing, you probably know elections, right? And that's why we're here today. We know there's a federal Secretary of State that's in charge of international diplomacy, things like that. A state Secretary of State is different. Typically, the secretaries serve as the chief elections officer, even though elections are administered by each county, right? So the rules we're going to be talking about here today are primarily what's in Santa Clara County. We work in partnership with them, but we oversee how elections are administered and implemented throughout the state. The largest division of my agency is, frankly, our business programs division. So for the entrepreneurs on the call, whenever you launch a company or start a new organization, you have to register with the state of California first. And so you do that through my office, whether it's an LLC, an LLP, even nonprofit organizations. And we've been trying to modernize how people can do that. We have what's called the Political Reform Division, which is a technical name for campaign finance. Every state candidate and every state campaign has to report where they raise money from and how they spend their money when it comes to the campaigns. And my office receives those reports, and we make that information publicly available for transparency purposes. And my office also serves as a custodian of the state's archives. So we have a lot of neat items in our collection, California government history going back to even prior to statehood. So we do a lot more than just elections, but elections gets most of the attention, and I think it's rightfully so.
That's a very broad remit. Thanks for that explanation. So maybe a follow-up to that. You said, and then most people probably assume that you're the chief elections officer. Does that mean that you have to be independent, nonpartisan? Do you pick sides? Do you influence? How does that work?
No, very good question, because it's not just the integrity of our elections that's paramount, but public confidence in our free and fair elections as well. Look, across the country, it works a little bit differently in each state. Most states have a Secretary of State, but not all do. Okay. In some states, it's a state board of elections or the lieutenant governor that oversees the elections. And across the country, some secretaries of state are elected, and some are appointed by governors in those respective states. So in California, it's a duly elected position by the people. It's not nonpartisan per se, But in the day job, we have to administer elections in a nonpartisan way, and I take that very seriously. It's like if you love hockey, I'm using this intentional example. Is the referee a fan of the sport? Probably. Does he
Yep.
or she have a favorite team? Probably. But when they're officiating, they have to just call it as they see it and go by the book. And that's how I am as Secretary of State. When state laws as it pertains to election administration and voting rights are very clear, and it's my job to make sure that every eligible voter, regardless of political leanings, has a easy opportunity to register, to stay registered, and to cast their ballot.
Fantastic. Makes me feel better. By the way, there are a couple of questions that are already started coming in through the Q&A tab. We'll get to those in a couple of minutes, but if you and the audience have one, please do enter it there. I heard you say a couple of minutes ago that you're committed to modernizing the office. That's probably a phrase that many of us aren't familiar with, and actually there's a fair number of tech people on this call. Maybe they think that is about using technology. Can you tell us a little bit more about what modernizing means?
Yeah, absolutely. I had my eye on the Secretary of State's office, not to run for it necessarily, but during my time in the legislature, where we get audits and reports and how we can improve state government in general. And I knew there was a lot of improvement that was needed in the Secretary of State's office. So modernization can mean something as simple as how do we improve how we administer elections that reflects modern life, right? So we've been expanding vote by mail, implementing the technology that enables vote centers, online voter registration, things like that. In many ways, it is answering for myself the question, how can we utilize state-of-the-art technology to improve, sort of fill in the blank. From the business programs division, I think that's been the biggest example for the longest time, to establish a business or to file statements of information or things of that nature. It was literally paper driven. You had to show up in person. Here's my packet for physical review, or send it in the mail. At one point it was taken maybe about a month and a half turnaround time for setting up a business, just through the Secretary of State's step. And I just didn't think there was any need for that. We can use technology. How about online transactions? That's not a revolutionary technology, but implementing technology in government seems to be a little tougher than it is in the private sector. So for all the transactions that we now enable to be conducted online, that's instantaneous, if not 24-hour turnaround time, not the 40+ days that were the case not that long ago. Another example I think of modernization is our state's archives, right? Tremendous record keeping of California history for researchers, for the press, and frankly, just for the general public. But for far too long, it required coming physically to Sacramento, making an appointment, and sitting in our research room to review those materials. We partnered with this startup in the Silicon Valley area called Google. Might have heard of it?
I've heard of it.
And the Google Cultural Institute to digitize a lot of our collection and to curate exhibits and upload them. So you can now visit our collections online. You don't have to physically come to Sacramento to benefit from that resource. So those are some of the examples of how can we improve our customer service utilizing technology, improving effectiveness, efficiency, and access.
Got it. So let's turn to election and related things. There's obviously a lot of talk about elections at all levels here in California, nationwide. I think millions of people have already voted so far, either by mail or in a secure drop-off ballot. I think we're at a record level or something. I maybe have heard you say that or your office point that out. Why do you think there is so much more interest this year? Why are so many people voting early?
Look, I think there's multiple reasons for why participation rates are high, and I'll give you a couple of additional data points. Starting with voter registration. The day I came in as Secretary of State, there were about 17.7 million registered voters on the rolls. We announced last month that more than 21 million voters were on the rolls, and I think we're going to hit 22 before Election Day. All right, so that's indicative of not just interest in participating in elections, but making it easier for people who are eligible to actually register to vote through online voter registration, automatic voter registration through DMV, et cetera. You point to the early ballot returns, more than 10 times the number compared to this stage just 4 years ago in the last presidential election. You know,
Sorry, Secretary Padilla, did you say 10 times more? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
10 times more, 10? Absolutely.
Wow. Sorry, keep going. I apologize.
That's okay. It's huge. I know it's hard to believe, but it's real.
Yep.
So I think it's a reflection both of interest in this election cycle, not just in the presidential contest, but probably especially in the presidential contest on both sides, but also a reflection of how easy we have made it in California to participate. Multiple options for being able to register, like I said, online through DMV, or even showing up and registering to vote same day at a voting location if you missed the deadlines. That's not the case in every state. And for actually voting, you can vote by mail, you can vote in person, you don't have to wait till election day, you can vote early, multiple options for voting and ensuring that your ballot counts. So maximizing access while maintaining security and integrity of the elections, plus the motivation that people have given the national political climate, I think all indicators are pointing towards a huge, huge turnout.
I don't know if I have your office and you in particular thanks for ballot tracks, but registering for them and seeing that my ballot was accepted after I dropped it off at the SAP center, that was phenomenal. It made me feel even better about voting.
Right. Another example of how we utilize technology to improve the voter experience. So for those who aren't familiar with ballot tracks, you can go to vote.ca.gov. That's our one-stop shop, our portal for all voter tools and information, including a button called Where's My Ballot? It's the technical name we give to ballot tracking. Any voter in California can sign up to receive automatic alerts on the status of their ballot through the delivery process, both outbound from the county to the voter and return, including confirmation when your ballot's been received and when it's been counted. So, vote by mail has been very successful and secure in California for a long time, but it seems like people are raising questions about it. So for added transparency and accountability, we expanded this ballot tracking tool to all voters in the state. Peace of mind knowing that your ballot arrived and is counted, and it provides it's a great diagnostic tool for us as well to identify any potential bottlenecks in mail delivery, because the post office has been in the news lately as well. So if we identify any bottlenecks or delays, we have real-time data down to the processing plant level, to a branch level, even to a carrier route level as people sign up. More than 2.5 million people have signed up already and growing every day.
So you mentioned controversy in voting. If you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about some of the controversy surrounding it. We've been hearing the phrase voter suppression more and more. I mean, I know it's been around as a concept for many, many years, but it certainly has raised its visibility in the popular lexicon lately. And it sounds like, the idea of a coordinated effort between lots of, let's call it bad actors, to keep people from voting, or maybe if they vote, to keep their ballots for counting. Is it really something we should worry about here in California? And if it is something we should worry about, what should we do about it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, sadly, part of the national debate, national narrative right now, shouldn't, this is my philosophy, shouldn't we be making it as easy as possible for eligible citizens to participate? So maximizing access to participation while maintaining security and integrity. But that's not the philosophy of every Secretary of State in the nation. So when you hear the stories about, unacceptably long lines and wait times for people to cast their ballot, the choice that people in Wisconsin, for example, had to make why do I have to show up and risk my health to be able to cast my ballot? Shouldn't I be able to vote from home during the COVID-19 pandemic, et cetera? It's a national debate. In California, I like to think that we have the bases covered. I've gone through the options a few times now, but voter suppression takes on multiple forms. It can take place in sort of the official administrative way when it's literally harder to go through the system to register to vote or to stay registered. We've heard of voter purging in states in recent years, or to actually cast your ballot. Sometimes it's psychological, where people are discouraged from voting through cynicism, like, well, why should I if my vote's not going to matter, or if it's not going to count, or if it's all going to be hacked anyway, or things of that nature. A lot of the misinformation recently about The integrity of vote by mail, I think, is driven by that. If people start losing confidence in the vote by mail option, and they may be less inclined to do that, and then the numbers are creeping up from a COVID standpoint. So why should I go vote on election day? It's these subliminal, sometimes blatant, but often subliminal efforts to discourage people from voting. That is the definition of voter suppression, and we work against that every single day through policies of making it easier to participate and voter education to maintain voter confidence in how it works here in California.
So if your office is helping with that, is there anything that we as individual citizens should be doing to help overcome the idea of voter suppression?
Yes, I mean, again, it comes in many forms, but if there's one thing that continues to worry me right now, it's the power and the danger of election disinformation, not just on, but especially on social media, right? We sometimes joke about it. Can't believe everything you see on Facebook or read on Twitter, etc. But a lot of times people are, retweeting and sharing information that is inaccurate. It could be misleading, it's erroneous, sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, a lot of times it is. And so, if you see something in your feed that makes you wonder, go to the official sources of information when it comes to elections, your county elections office or the Secretary of State. Again, vote.ca.gov is our main portal. 99% of your questions are answered there. And please don't amplify the bad information that's out there.
Thank you. So how about the other end of the spectrum? There's also talk that things have become so easy to register or so easy to vote that somehow people are figuring out how to vote more than once, or dead people are voting, or those that aren't technically eligible are voting. Is that something that worries you or your office? Is that something that we as a community should worry about as well?
Look, we do take the potential of voter fraud very seriously, but the good news is we have a lot of safeguards against that. So protocols in place, to keep people from, voting by mail, for example, and then showing up and voting in person. So we know how to measure against that, or voting in person and then, having received the ballot in the mail after the fact. Anybody who tries to vote twice, the first ballot will count, the others will not. I think one of the examples, given the big increase in vote by mail, is the security around voting by mail. It starts with the ballot itself. Every election, every county selects unique paper types to print their ballots on. Think of our currency, right? We're talking watermarks and other distinguishing features to guard against counterfeit ballots. We're even thinking that deep in all of this. When you vote by mail, your ballot has to come back in the official envelope. Each envelope has a unique barcode that helps us confirm the identity of the voter. It also helps enable the ballot tracking tool that I mentioned previously. And we require folks who vote by mail to sign the outside of the envelope and date it. The very first thing county officials do when they receive those vote by mail ballots is compare the signature on the envelope with the signature on file for that voter as part of their voter registration record to, again, confirm the identity of the voter, not just protect against double voting, but guard against somebody trying to vote on somebody else's behalf.
All the times I've voted, I never really realized why I was signing the outside of the ballot. Thank you for telling me that. That makes total sense, but it never occurred to me why. So appreciate that. Well, I'm going to mix in a few questions on this thread that are coming from the audience in the Q&A tab. And someone asked a question I alluded to, and I think you did as well, official ballot boxes. And we've heard a story that there were some non-official ballot boxes, even here in California. Someone said, well, if I had dropped my ballot in one of those, my legal ballot in one of those non-official ballot boxes, what does that mean to my vote? What happened?
All right. So let me answer that voter's question specifically, and then explain why this is an important issue. So if you might have delivered your ballot to what turned out to be an unauthorized, unofficial ballot drop box, one of the best things you can contact your county to ensure that it's got delivered to them, and or sign up for Where's My Ballot, because you'll get those notifications when your ballot's received and when it's been counted. So we can track it down and account for it, number one. The reason that they were so problematic is, look, here's the options voters have to return their ballots, because every active registered voter received the ballot in the mail recently. You can mail it back. In California, you don't even need to worry about stamps. Return postage is prepaid. But as an option to mailing your ballot back, you can deliver it to any official ballot drop box in your county. They've been in place since prior to COVID, a convenient option for many. And the reason we emphasize the official boxes is because only county governments are authorized to set these up. They have specific requirements they need to meet, from construction, security, installation, etc., how often ballots are retrieved and by who. Only official county elections personnel can retrieve those ballots. Your third option is to drop it off in person at any in-person voting location. If after all that, a voter still needs assistance in returning their ballot, the voter decides who they trust to help them with that. But the person assisting them must also sign the envelope, add their name, signature, and relationship to the voter. So we call a chain of custody provision, so we know, who's helping who here in case there's any issues. That was lost with these unofficial drop boxes. Voters were misled through the labeling of them. They literally said official ballot drop box, American flag behind it, etc. It was made to look official. So any voter who might have deposited their ballot there does not know who it was that was retrieving those ballots. And therefore, the security of the box itself cannot be guaranteed, and delivery to the county cannot be guaranteed. And so that's why the Attorney General and I had to take action as quickly as we did to have those boxes removed. We seem to have accounted for all the ballots, at least that's what we're told thus far. There's ongoing investigation that's happening. So anybody who might have delivered their ballot to one of those boxes, again, contact your county. You can find the directory and contact information at vote.ca.gov and sign up for Where's My Ballot to get the notification when your ballot is received and counted.
Thank you, Secretary Padilla. Maybe another related question coming from the audience, which is many of us, maybe even most of us on this Zoom, are in Northern California. Technology runs through our valley, as you mentioned earlier. Do you ever envision us voting online or even through our mobile devices at some point in the future, or is that just too hard to pull off?
Look, someday, maybe in the future, but not anytime soon. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I bring a lot of technology mindset to the administration of the Secretary of State's office. And even in the elections world, it's technology that enables vote centers, technology that enables ballot tracking, technology that's improved our even how we report results. But when it comes to the actual act of voting, paper ballots. The internet is not secure to maintain not just the security of how we may be able to vote, but the privacy of it. The privacy of our vote is fundamental in our democracy, and the internet's just not built that way. So, maybe one day when we stop hearing about hacks or breaches of movie studios and political parties and retailers, even government agencies, we can think about voting online, but not anytime soon.
So we shouldn't be waiting around for that. Paper ballots is the answer for the foreseeable
Paper ballots
future.
is the answer. And look, with all the reforms we put in place, we can't make it much easier. The ballot comes to your home. You can vote from the comfort, safety of your own home and mail it back without leaving your home. Or you can drop it off or a drop box, or you can show up in person, not just one day, election day, but over the course of multiple days. So you can choose best when, where, and how you choose to vote, but it won't be through our smartphones anytime soon.
So I'll pivot back to in-person voting, which still a large fraction of Californians do, although we're seeing obviously more and more vote by mail and by the secure drop-off as well. Given challenges like COVID, given you mentioned the post office and some people have concerns, although it sounds like you don't think they should, are we still dealing with a lack of people that are poll workers? Are there other obstacles of getting people out to vote, or are we in good shape in California? Should we, in other words, if I decide to vote in person, am I going to have to wait like 11 hours, so I should show up at 6 in the morning to make sure I've voted by 8 p.m. at night?
No, look, we are encouraging earlier rather than later and sooner rather than later. But you're absolutely right. California has not just a large and diverse population, we have the largest and most diverse electorate of any state in the nation, which means as popular as vote by mail is, there's a lot of people who need the in-person option. And so we're committed to maintaining that. It's not an all vote by mail only election. We've worked with hand in hand with counties throughout the state to ensure a sufficient number of locations that are going to be available for multiple days for in-person voting. But voting during COVID is going to be a little different. It's kind of like going to the grocery store. You know, number one, bring your mask. Number two, look for the signage. Let's keep distancing between voters. Number three, you know, be prepared to see those poll workers outfitted with PPE, face shields, gloves, etc., to keep themselves and voters safe. Fourth, hand sanitizer all around. Sanitizer for everybody. You know, and five, even wiping down the equipment between voters to make sure that we're doing all the things we need to do to keep it a safe and healthy voting experience for the people who must vote in person. But we can try to keep those lines a little bit shorter on election day if you vote early. And so those are the two biggest themes right now that the voter registration deadline has passed is make a plan for how you're going to vote. Don't wait for the last minute to figure this out. Decide now, are you going to vote by mail or are you going to vote in person? However you choose, do it early, right? Don't wait for the last minute to send back your ballot. Send it sooner if you can. If you're going to vote in person, go the first day. Voting locations are open. Don't wait for the last day. And by the way, I just want to thank the San Jose Sharks and SAP Center for their partnership in hosting a ballot drop box at the arena. It's not a full-on vote center, but a ballot drop box in a place that is known to many and is easily accessible. It's very central to the city and the county. So thank you for the partnership on that front.
It's our pleasure, and it is very convenient. I used it to vote myself.
Good.
So here's a voter's question, which I find intriguing. I never really thought about it myself as well. This voter says, essentially, I'm going to paraphrase the longer question, which is, I'm not sure I remember every thing I voted for. There were 3,000 initiatives this year. Is there a way to get a copy of one's ballot when it's all over and what actually was approved and not approved so I compare what I voted to for what actually happened?
No, there's not a way to get a copy from us or from the county on your ballot. Look, once the ballot is cast, you know, we can't tell whose ballot that was. It's part of maintaining the privacy of your vote. What I do see a lot of people doing is taking a selfie with their ballot and bragging about, I voted for so-and-so, or I voted for so-and-so, or yes on this measure, no on that measure, kind of a thing. So you can keep a copy for your own use or records, but no way to retrieve one after it's been cast.
So it is okay for me to scan my ballot in or take a copy of it with my smartphone and have images of my ballot. That's okay, right?
That's okay. You're not going to be in trouble for that. You know, it's an interesting one. I just got a question yesterday from somebody even in Washington, D.C. who wasn't sure about it, because up until a couple of years ago, it was technically illegal in California to take a selfie with your ballot. So it is allowed, number one, and look, if you're doing it at home, it's clearly not a problem. If you go vote in person, the thing we have to be mindful of is respecting other voters' privacy. So if you're going to take what we call a ballot selfie, you know, just make sure we're not interfering with somebody else exercising their right to vote in a private, confidential way. So be mindful of those around you.
Yeah, I was in a discussion with some friends over the weekend. Copying a dollar bill is technically illegal. So we wondered whether copying a ballot, even though it's your ballot, was illegal as well. It's good to know that it's not. Yeah. I can go back to that group and tell them.
Just don't try to cast it, okay?
Fair enough. This isn't the old joke of vote early and vote often. Yes, I understand. So here's another individual question that says, how often are the ballot boxes emptied? This, and I don't quite understand the question, perhaps you will. This person says they submitted their ballot last week, signed up for Where's My Ballot, and the notification still says my ballot is out for delivery to me.
Okay, no, that's a fair question. Look, at this stage of the election, well, I guess we're 13 days out now. So if it was last week, it was in the window of state law required counties to retrieve those ballots no less than 96 hours, every 4 days. So if you turned in your ballot and the ballot had just been collected there, the county is not coming back there maybe for 4 days. It depends. The frequency is tighter closer to election day because that's when the volume increases. But the counties also know which ballot boxes are in heavier use and retrieve ballots from there more frequently than those that aren't getting a whole lot of traffic there. So if you dropped it off at a ballot drop box and it's been a few days, that's not out of the ordinary. The good news is you did sign up for ballot track. So once it's retrieved, the county will alert you. And then when it's been counted, the county will alert you. I should also mention, when you sign up for ballot tracks, you're also providing us the most up-to-date contact information for you. So if there's any issues with your ballot, if the signatures don't match or you forgot to sign your signature, the county knows the best way to communicate that to you so you can cure any issues to make sure your vote is counted. Otherwise, you just go to what information we have on your voter registration record and hope that it's pretty up to date.
Sounds good. All right, Secretary Padilla, I'm going to try to squeeze in a couple more questions from the audience. We have a ton of them, so I won't be able to get to them all. But here's an interesting one. This person says, I have friends and families. I lived in different states in the U.S., and it's surprising, maybe even amazing, how different the rules are and the dates are from state to state to state. Do you think we'll ever get to a nationwide voting strategy similar to other developing countries, or do you think this is something that's always going to be, given our federalist background, vary from state to state?
Yeah. Look, I do think we'll get more towards a standardization of how elections are administered. I don't think we'll get to a centralization of how elections are administered. You know, it's written into the Constitution. Elections are administered by states, not the federal government. So that's the reason for the state-by-state differences in the rules. I think from a security standpoint, that's a good thing, right? Because it's not just hacking one system and all of a sudden you've undone the entire nation's democracy. But when it comes to voting rights, I do think we have a ton of room for improvement. And given all the focus on elections, voting rights, election security in recent years, I'm hoping the time is ripe very soon to make some significant steps in that direction in the next couple of years.
All right. Well, maybe sneak in two more here if we can. First one, the last one from the audience might be, we live in a blue state. What do you say to somebody that says, I don't really need to vote, given the Electoral College, we already know what the outcome is here. It's too much trouble, I don't want to do it.
Couldn't disagree more. All right, there's people who marched and bled, literally. Some gave their lives for the right to vote because it matters. And so, we should recognize our right to vote for what it is. It's power, political power. Second, California may be considered today a safe blue state for the presidential contest, but there's so many other things on the ballot that matter. It could be other federal officials, it could be state officials, could be local officials. There's important ballot initiatives that we are voting on every single election. I bet you, if you ask yourself, what issue or issues do I care about, that you can draw a direct line, not to the President of the United States, but to other local officials or local governments that are much more meaningful in the school funding conversation, college affordability, access to healthcare, just on and on and on. Just this summer, we saw our nation's most recent movement towards social justice. If you want to make an impact on criminal justice reform, you should worry about the sheriff's race and the district attorney's race, not just the presidential contest that's on the ballot.
It's a fantastic reminder that there's more than just the presidential election on the ballot, and lots of it impacts your individual life as well. Look, there are many more questions that we could ask you. This audience has clearly been very engaged, but I know you're personally short on time and have to get to another engagement. So maybe I'll end with one, if you don't mind, lighthearted, non-voter oriented question, which is, you live in SoCal. I know that you're a huge sports fan. I believe you may be nonpartisan when it comes to election, but probably not nonpartisan when it comes to the World Series. How do you see the Dodgers' chances, and are they going to become the version of the Buffalo Bills when they went to the Super Bowl 4 years in a row but never quite made it? They've been on a great run here, but never quite got over the hump. What do you think?
Ouch, ouch. I am cautiously optimistic. Look, I feel good about the team's chances. They're playing well right now. They've got a lot of momentum and clear chemistry in the dugout that I think is critical in the postseason. But look, we've been close before 3 times the last 4 years going to the World Series. So I don't want to jinx anything. We'll just hope for a good outcome of this 4-game series. 1 win down, 3 more to go, and hoping, knock on wood, that they bring home a trophy, although there's not going to be a parade, right? The Lakers just won a championship, no parade because of COVID. If the Dodgers are able to win, we'll celebrate virtually.
Sounds good. And sorry for the outs, but there's always a little bit of NorCal, SoCal rivalry, so I had to get it in. Appreciate it. Secretary Padilla, Alex, thank you so much for this. This was hugely engaging. You probably can't see the chat and the questions. People are very supportive of what you've done for us as a state and the transparency that you've brought into us. So thank you for taking the time with us. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank all of you. And I know it's a tough time out there. Let's keep wearing our masks, keep washing our hands. Let's continue to stay safe. We'll get through this together. And want to make sure that I make the pitch in sometime in the future when we're able to reconvene in person. Let's do this again, maybe while we're riding a Zamboni.
Ha! Love that. And you're welcome to come up and visit us as soon as sports open up. I'd be happy to have you as a hosted for the game. So,
all right. Sounds good.
Sounds good as well. We may be done with Secretary Padilla, but we're not yet done with today's program. We have a few more things coming on. I'd like to turn it over to Heather Hooper, who is the Director of Community Relations and the Sharks Foundation, and also more recently a council member for our newly created Teal for Change Council. Heather, over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thank you so much, Secretary Padilla. We really appreciated hearing from you today. As Jonathan mentioned, I am an incredibly proud member of the Sharks Teal for Change Council, which is an internal working group whose mission is to take initiative to educate each other, shine a light on racial, social, and gender discrimination, and fight to end injustices within Team Teal and all Bay Area communities. Teal for Change really actively seeks opportunities to engage with Sharks territory and identify opportunities for our brand and team to address the greatest needs of our community. And when we heard of the critical shortages of poll workers and the concerns over whether or not we as a county would have enough safe and accessible polling locations due to COVID, we initiated conversations with the Secretary of State's office and the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters to see how we can support. The county really quickly identified 3 areas of greatest need. 1 being ballot drop box locations, 2 being the encouragement of volunteers to sign up to be poll workers, and 3 was the dissemination of accurate election information, as the Secretary touched on earlier. We immediately began working with SAP on logistics of a nonpartisan voter engagement campaign, which includes SAP Center hosting 2 official ballot drop boxes, support and encouragement of our staff members who have an interest in volunteering as poll workers, the utilization of our brand's digital platforms to distribute accurate information and election-related reminders to partners and fans, a nonpartisan election information hub at sjsharks.com/vote, and more. To date, the SAP Center drop boxes have accepted nearly 4,000 ballots, which is something we are incredibly proud of. To us, that showcases that 4,000 individuals chose our arena to be the safe, trustworthy location in which their voice could be heard and their vote cast. The Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters shared with me a really intriguing stat that more than 218,000 ballots have been cast in Santa Clara County so far, and that's record-breaking. 21% of eligible votes have already, our voters have already done so, have already voted. And at this time in 2016, we only had 8.3%. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank SAP for their collaboration on this campaign and for being ongoing such strong impact partners. I'd also like to thank the Secretary of State's office and the Santa Clara County Registrar of Voters for the guidance and partnership that they've given us throughout this process. And lastly, I'd really like to thank and share my gratitude with the members of Team Teal and the Teal for Change Council for all the work that you do, and specifically the effort to make this happen. And with that, Jonathan, we'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate that summary. 4,000 ballots nearly at the SAP Center. That's really phenomenal. Of course, I'm always one that loves a challenge. So let's get that number above 10,000. Let's make sure we tell everybody about that they can drop off here. With that, I'd actually like to introduce Kevin Richards. Kevin is the Vice President and Head of U.S. Government Affairs at SAP and a longtime friend and colleague. Kevin.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you for the kind introduction. It's so good to see you. And on behalf of SAP, thank you for inviting me to join you today. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin Richards. As Jonathan said, I'm Vice President and Head of U.S. Government Affairs at SAP. I want to really commend the San Jose Sharks. It was great to hear from Secretary of State Padilla today and that he was able to join us. And it's a no small part, and as a result of his leadership, that he's able to ensure that California voters have the resources they need to cast their votes in the 2020 election. As you all know, so far, this has been a record-breaking year for voting in California. And due to the Secretary's efforts, over 1.5 million vote-by-mail ballots have already been returned in the state. And the Secretary's office has overseen a huge increase in voter registration. So thank you to the Secretary and for his team for doing what they can to protect the integrity of this election and promote our democracy. I also want to commend Jonathan and the San Jose Sharks for their leadership in hosting today's events, as well as for partnering with the County of Santa Clara Register Our Voters to make the SAP Center available as a ballot drop-off location. The San Jose Sharks are a wonderful partner to SAP and the entire Bay Area community. And all of us here at SAP, Jonathan, are supportive and in your corner in the entire San Jose Sharks organization with your efforts to bring the Stanley Cup to San Jose. So go Team Teal. In terms of California, we're thrilled that the SAP Center stepped up to volunteer to play a role in helping our employees and our neighbors cast their ballots in a safe and accessible manner. Our company takes great pride in our almost 4,500 employees in the Bay Area, located at 3 offices in San Ramon and Palo Alto and San Francisco. And of those employees, over 2,000 of them are serving critical engineering and development roles focused on our major cloud products such as SuccessFactors and Ariba. As you know, the Bay Area and Silicon Valley are the epicenter of innovation. There isn't a sector of our nation's economy that isn't affected by what's done here, which is why SAP has been a very active and supportive member of this community for many years. After all, SAP's mission is to improve people's lives and make the world a better place. And it's because of this mission that really drives our commitment and investment in our communities throughout California and across the country, where SAP has a strong local presence. And through our partnerships in the community and throughout the Bay Area, over 1,800 SAP employees have volunteered more than 5,400 hours to 50 causes in 1 year alone during 2019. In California, we're committed to investing also in STEM education efforts to help build a skilled, diverse tech talent pipeline in the state. And one of these examples is that we maintain a deep partnership with the Computer Science and Technology Academy at Skyline High School in Oakland. At SAP, we realize that without a strong talent pipeline in Silicon Valley, we won't be able to further our cloud innovation and serve our world-class customers. About this year's election, it's right around the corner, and there's no doubt that it will have a big impact on our nation's political and economic landscapes. This year, hundreds of seats at both the federal and state level are at stake, and candidates who win these seats will have a lasting impact on the policies that affect our families and our communities. In just under 2 weeks, Americans will cast their ballots, and in some cases already have, if they chose the mail-in option to elect officials at every level of our government, from local school boards to the presidency. At SAP, we believe that voting is a fundamental right, and our democracy works best when all of us participate. As part of my role in government affairs, I lead a team that advocates before policymakers on behalf of SAP to advance the legislative and regulatory issues that impact our company and our ability to make new breakthroughs that benefit our businesses, our customers, and our society. We also support candidates who have knowledge and an understanding of the IT industry, whose positions on key policy issues can help shape SAP's success, and who represent our SAP employees, our facilities, and our values, and who sit on committees of jurisdiction over issues relevant to our business. And we do support candidates on both sides of the aisle. We really are proud of our recent work partnering with our colleagues across the company in the areas of corporate social responsibility, as well as diversity and inclusion, to empower our employees to exercise their right to vote in the 2020 election so that our voices can be heard on the issues we care about. With strong report from our corporate leadership, SAP has become a signee of two key initiatives called Time to Vote and the Civic Alliance. Both are nonpartisan business coalitions that are designed to get companies to contribute to the cultural shift needed to increase voter turnout and recruit employees to volunteer their time at the polls. More than 800 companies have signed up for Time to Vote, and over 185 leading companies announced volunteer efforts as part of the Civic Alliance. In support of these important initiatives, our company has taken the following actions related to voting accommodations for our employees. We are promoting Election Day on November 3rd as a day without meetings for all of our US employees, over 25,000 employees across the country. Proactively, we're encouraging all of our managers to provide flexibility to allow our employees to vote on Election Day. We're also recognizing that some states offer time off to vote, but our employees are also welcome to take a few hours since there are historically long lines expected for voting this November in different areas throughout the country. We're also reminding our employees who plan to vote in person that they can use a personal or vacation day on Election Day. In 2020, SA employees have 5 personal days to be used at their discretion with the approval of their manager. We're also inspiring our employees to consider volunteering at local polling locations and to track their efforts via SAP Together, which is SAP's global employee engagement and volunteering and giving platform. Providing information on obtaining mail-in ballots or early voting, and reminding our employees to follow guidelines of their state of residence. And finally, encouraging employees to take a moment to make sure they are registered to vote. Be sure you register, everyone. Your voice is important this election. In conclusion, as you may have noticed, we believe at SAP that the Election Day is more important than ever this year. And regardless of your political views, you should not have to choose between voting and earning a paycheck. When we vote, we shape the future of our communities and our country. Again, I want to reiterate my thanks to Secretary of State Padilla, the County of Santa Clara Registrar of Voters, and the entire San Jose Sharks organization for their efforts to ensure that every voter has the opportunity to make their vote count in the 2020 election this November. On behalf of SAP, we are happy to partner with all of you. And thank you again for joining us today to discuss this important issue. Again, Jonathan, thank you, and back to you.
Kevin, thanks. Appreciate that. Thank you for the inspiring words. A reminder for all of us that we do need to exercise our right to vote, and for all that SAP is doing to encourage its employees to vote here in the US as well. And I'm certain in other countries as well, given that SAP is an international company.
Absolutely.
I just want to end our time together today with a personal thought. I've voted in every election, both gubernatorial and presidential, since I earned the right to vote. I do so for a deeply personal reason, and that is, as it sounds like Secretary Padilla is as well, I am a first-generation American. My parents were not born in the US. In fact, I'm the first person in my extended family to be born in the United States. And I saw from a little kid how my parents were proud to be an American and how they went through the naturalization process and through their entire lives said they became American first and executed their rights as granted to them by American citizens. That shaped a lot of my fundamental belief. So I have a request for all of you that joined us today. If you haven't voted yet, please do vote. If you haven't registered, it's not too late, as you heard, that you can do same-day registration. But please go beyond that. Encourage your family, encourage your friends, encourage your work colleagues to be heard. Voting is one of the most important things that you can do as a US citizen. Finally, my thanks to everyone in the Sharks organization to help organize this, in particular the Teal for Change Council for bringing this opportunity to us. It was fantastic. I learned a ton. I hope all of you did as well. And I hope all of you at SAP, here at Team Teal, our partners, and the members of the extended community that joined us today enjoyed your time with us. Take care, be safe, and of course, please vote. With that, we come to the end of today's session. Goodbye, everybody.